Hello, Hub subscribers. This is Justin Hofstetter once again with another one of our author interviews. Today we sit down with Mindy McGinnis. You know her from her brilliantly controversial novels of all different types. She's going to talk to us about that controversy. She's going to talk to us about her philosophies and her approaches to writing and some of the pushback that she gets from that, as well as some really exciting news about upcoming projects, including her new novel coming out this November and some other projects that are coming up after that. So stay tuned for our interview with Mindy McGinnis. All right. Well, good morning. We are here with Mindy McGinnis. Mindy, we're here on the Hub. This is a teen librarian focused blog. So just to start us off, why don't you tell us about your journey with libraries and what libraries have meant to you in your life and in your career?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from a really small town in Ohio. I live in the Midwest and I'm a farmer's daughter. And I grew up mostly just like being at home and playing outside. But one of the things that was really imperative to my childhood in my summers was the summer reading program at the library. And, we got our little booklet and our checklist. And it was something that we didn't take vacations, like we didn't go places, we didn't take vacations, we didn't go to Florida or amusement parks or anything like that. Like it just didn't happen. When you're a farmer, you're working 24/7. You can't leave. So, going away was just never a possibility for us. So, going to the library once a week was just the biggest, it was an outing. And that stuck with me throughout my whole life. Going to the library is just a wonderful, lovely, fun thing to do. And I worked in a school library, a public school, for 14 years and loved that job. I could have been a high school librarian for the rest of my life and been happy. I got lucky and I got published, but there's still this instinctive side of me. I do school visits and I'll be in someone else's library and a kid will be asking the librarian, "Can you help me find a book? I'm looking for something." And I'm like, "Oh, wait, here." And I'm just like, "Let me do it," because I miss doing that. I love, of course, recommending my own books, but I just know the the book world so thoroughly, and I always want to promote good books. And so when I'm reading books that I love, I'm just like, "Oh, you need to read this. You'll love this." And I can't help it. It's just this instinctive telling people about books.
I definitely get that. If you can't tell, I'm zooming from the high school library where I work.
Yes.
Quick peek of
Oh, what a nice space. That's awesome.
Oh, it's gorgeous. When I interviewed with my principal, he asked me why I wanted to work here, and I said selfishly, I think it's the most beautiful room in the district. But
Yes.
so what was that path like for you from high school librarian to published author?
So I don't have my MLS. I was an aide. So I made about $14,000 a year. And I was a single parent with two kids. And when you make $14,000 a year, there's a cat just dropping in there. That's Gilly. Um, when you make $14,000 a year and you have two kids, things are tight. So I was very much so that's another way actually libraries were really important to me because I took my kids to the library all the time, free stuff. And it's an outing for them and they loved it. I'm an expert at free parenting, but um, I really knew since I was small, like I can't remember a time when I didn't know that I wanted to be a writer. I've always wanted to be a writer. Everyone in my family is a farmer or a teacher, and I mean that literally everyone. An extended family. That's what we do. And no one knows like how does a person get published? Like what is that like? And I just had to figure it all out on my own. And this was even before the internet was like super informative. Like it wasn't something I was going to bookstores and buying, the writer's market guide to literary agents for 1998, and stuff like that. And I had been trying to get published for over 10 years or get an agent for over 10 years, and I wasn't having any luck. And financially, things were super, super sketchy. And I told myself, if I'm going to be a responsible parent, I think I have to give up this idea, this dream, and go get my master's and get a better paying job, being a real librarian, not just an aide. And I had gone through all of the steps. I had my transcript, I had my application. At that time, the only school in Ohio that offered the MLS was Kent State. And I had everything together to apply to Kent State to get my master's. And I got an agent. And I was like, oh, okay, like great. But at that point, it had been over 10 years that I'd been trying to get an agent. And I just assumed that, you know, this was not going to happen for me. And I got really lucky. I sold my first book in 2010. It didn't come out until 2013, but Not a Drop to Drink was my first book. And I have been publishing since then. My 14th book actually comes out this November. So, people ask me how long have you been writing? And it's like, well, I've been publishing since 2013, but I have been writing. I wrote my first novel when I was a freshman in college. And it was actually a very early version of The Female the Species, which is now my best-selling book. But I wrote a version of that when I was like 18 or 19, and it got published when I was 32. So, it's just one of those things where you have to. I'm not a fan of never give up because you can't bash your face against a brick wall continuously. But I take breaks. I would take breaks. I would be like, okay, like I have exhausted myself mentally and emotionally trying to get published. I'm not going to try to write something new. I'm not going to edit anything. I'm taking a break. And I would just like chill for 6 months. And then I'd be like, oh, I got a new idea. And then, jump back in. And I've been very fortunate to be able to do this for a living.
That's awesome. So I think one of the things that really makes you stand out at least at first in the YA marketplace, I feel like a lot of folks have caught up. And one of the reactions that I always get from kids, inevitably, if somebody's a first-time Mindy McGinnis reader, they come up to me, they bring up the book, and they're like, "Can she really say that, or can she really do that?" Has that always been your approach as an author, or is that something that you developed as kind of your competitive advantage in the marketplace?
No, so that's who I am as a human. So like when you're around me in real life, that happens. I will just say something and people are like, can you just say that? And I'm like, yeah, I can because it's America. So that's just who I am. It's how I talk, it's how I behave. I did work, of course, in a public school for 14 years, and I got a mouth on me, but I also am good at switching my hats out, right? So when I'm a librarian, I am not swearing and I am not saying inappropriate things, right? And I still substitute in the district where I used to work. And I am just very adept at switching out my hats. And it's like, well, I am being an adult and a professional right now. And I am going to be someone that the kids can, talk to and be open and free with, but I am going to be a responsible adult. But when I'm at the gym, everybody look out, like it's gonna get nasty. So, it's like that's just the way I work. And I write the way that I hear and see kids talking and behaving. And the thing is, like, teens are not a monolith. Do all teens say the F word every other word? No, they don't. Do all adults say the F word every other word? No, they don't. And the same is true. Are all teenagers drinking? No. Do all adults drink? No. Are all teenagers having sex? No. Are all adults having sex? Definitely not. So, it's just one of those things where I just write real people doing real things, living in the real world. And people are always shocked by that. And I'm just like, it's just real life. Like, why I don't understand why I genuinely don't understand why people get upset about representations of reality. Like it doesn't make any sense to me.
So you mentioned people getting upset about, the way that you represent reality. Besides, pushback on kind of an individual level, what kinds of kind of organized pushback have you seen from that?
Oh, I'm on all the lists, right? So it's like, um, interestingly, Heroin was my first novel to get challenged or banned. It is about the opioid epidemic. And when I got an email, it was actually from a school in Missouri. I got an email asking from a student of a school that I had visited, asking if I knew that my book, Heroin, had been challenged there in her school district. And when I got the email, the subject line was like, one of your books is being challenged or something like that. Yes, that one. And I had not at that point, that would be like 2020, 2021. And at that point in my life, I had not been challenged or banned. And I kept waiting for it because I had some things that like female of the species for sure, right? And the truth is that I flew under the radar for a really long time because I'm white and I'm straight. And so no one was looking at me. And I literally had to write a book called Heroin for someone to take a look. And I found it like amusing in some ways, to be honest with you, because it's by far my cleanest book. It is my cleanest book. And once that hit the radar, I just ended up being someone that gets all of their titles looked at. And at this point in time, I'm pretty sure every single one of my books has been challenged or banned somewhere in the country. And, like that's fine. I don't get upset about it. I don't get angry. I oddly like do understand in most cases, like if it's driven by any sort of prejudice, then no, that's not okay. But if it truly is parents that are just like, hey, I'm worried about what my child is exposed to, I mean, yeah, I get that. I mean, I worry about what kids are exposed to, but I'm not worried about books. Like I'm worried about this, okay? So it's like there are definitely concerns that I have about what teens are exposed to, but I don't think that there is any danger in reading books that represent things that they are not familiar with or haven't experienced because for example, if it's sex or drugs or something like that, no one is going to, in the YA realm, no one is going to be writing a book with drug use in it where there aren't consequences. So I just think it's safer to do that exploratory, safe exploration through fiction. I can't tell you, I've had probably 10 or 12 emails from kids or DMs, that are like, hey, I read your book Heroin and I figured out that I have a problem because, I pop pills on the weekends for fun. And I realized like, it was a Wednesday afternoon and I was like, oh, I kind of want to be high. And they were like, oh, I have a problem. And they knew this because they had read my book. And I've had a few kids like contact me and be like, hey, I read your book and it made me get clean. I've never had a single person email me and say, hey, I read your book and I started doing drugs. Like, never, not once. So, I just think that that is something that people don't realize. And a lot of the times, too, I see people that are upset about what their child might be exposed to. And I often wonder if they don't realize their child likely already has been exposed to these things in some way. I just think the world is can be a really dark and dirty place. And I know that I was exposed to things when I was a teenager, like in the 90s. This is before the internet was really a thing. And I would be like, oh my God, and like be completely shocked, but also somewhat prepared because I read books. And so like I would be in a situation that I was like, oh, and then instinctively be like, oh, you know what? Like that's not good. And it's because I was drawing on this wealth of knowledge and information that I had in my brain from reading fiction. And I just really think that, I was a person that, took risks and did some things that weren't terribly smart. And as an adult, I look back on my teenage life and I'm like, wow, you're still alive. That's amazing. But it's one of those things where it's like a lot of the things that I was participating in was more like, physical danger, driving too fast, swimming when the river is way too high, things like that. And I anything with sex, drugs, and stuff like that, I was always just like, hey, whoa, you know what? I know where that goes because I read a book. You know what I mean? And I don't know. It's just I truly do think, if a parent says this book is not appropriate for my child, they're that child's parent. And that is their decision. They are legally that child's guardian, and they can say that. When they say, I don't think any child should be reading this book, they don't know every other child. And it's possible that that child needs a representation of something that's happening in their life to be even not necessarily normalized or being like, oh no, this isn't normal. Books about sexual abuse and things like that. Like kids, these things happen, and adults don't like to think about it because it makes them uncomfortable. And like that's where I end up landing often is like, oh, this is making the adults uncomfortable. I don't know that teens are uncomfortable with this material. Their parents are uncomfortable with this material. And it's because they're worried about their kids, and I get that, you know. But there are millions of kids out there that have a different life than their child's, and they need books like this. And so myself and people like me, we're not going to stop writing them. So I just keep do what I'm doing. And you know, the next one, my book that comes out in November, is called How Girls Are Made, and it is actually about sex ed. I pitch it as Dead Poets Society for Sex Ed, so it's like underground, student-led, off-campus sex ed, and it deals with three different things that I see teenage girls dealing with at a rate that I find pretty compelling. Three different POVs, three different narrators, and each of them has a distinct problem. One of them is a perfectionist, people pleaser, just always just has to make sure no one is mad at her, make sure everybody's good. The second one is an emotionally abusive relationship. She was previously in a physically abusive relationship, so she like can't see it. And then the third one is a girl who gets all of her self-worth and self-respect and any sort of affirmation from her social media. And I have just those three characters moving through their lives, and their intersection point is this sex ed class. And you know, I think that those are three different things that a lot of teenage girls have going on in their lives that aren't healthy. And I just am doing it through this lens of talking about sex ed as well, because I have overheard some conversations as a substitute that I'm just like, oh my God. Like, I can't believe the misinformation or the ignorance when it comes to sex and safety and sexual assault and safety and even how to report sexual assault. And I have overheard, I had one day where I subbed and I overheard like three different things, and I was like, okay, I have to write a book. Like, this is not good. And that, you know, it was just born out of that. It was like, wow, I mean, people are worried about what their kids are exposed to. Like, I'm worried about what they don't know. I'm worried about what they aren't informed about.
Um, so to go along with that, then you're talking about your upcoming book, and then with talking about heroin and really exploring um, things that teens need to know and understanding the consequences of risky behaviors. How do you get into that without being like the cheesy after school special, very special episode of Full House approach? How do you how do you get to those conclusions in an earnest way?
Yeah, so I represent things honestly. So like in heroin, one of the reasons why heroin gets in trouble is because people like to claim that it glorifies drug use. Now it doesn't. If you've read the book, you know that it does not. However, you know, when I was growing up, you know, you'd have your very special episodes of your after school special with The More You Know. And you know, somebody would like smoke weed and a grand piano would fall on their head. And it was like, don't do drugs, kids. Like, I mean, it was just this automatic thing. And the books that were written when I was a young teen, it was like, you know, someone would have sex and they woke up in the morning and they had like rabies and were pregnant with triplets and they'd lost an eye, right? Like it was just like immediate, horrible, terrible consequences. And that is not how it works. Like that is not life. And so I write realistically. And so, for example, in heroin, my main character, you know, she's given Oxycontin to recover from an injury from a car crash, and she's trying to get through her physical therapy in order to be ready to play softball her senior year. And they give her Oxycontin, and Oxycontin feels great. Like that's just the way it is. That's what it's made to do. It is a massive hit of dopamine, and it throws you into euphoria. And I had to have eye surgery years ago, and they gave me Oxycontin, and I took an Oxy, and I was laying in bed, and I was like, well, this is the best day of my life. Like, it was the best day of my life. I have given birth to children. They've handed me my baby, and I'm like, well, this is better. Like, it's just ridiculously good. And no one, no kid is going to feel that and be like, oh, there could be consequences to this, right? They're just like, no, that was awesome, right? Um, and there is no immediate negative. It's just not there. You don't have a hangover, you don't like you just feel great. And I illustrated that. Like I show people doing drugs and being like, this is awesome. And that's how it actually is, right? But then, things go horribly wrong and you get into the world of addiction and panic and despair and, withdrawal and actually crapping your pants in public and things like that that are not sexy and that are not glorifying drugs and is the actual result of addiction and losing your friendships and everything that you care about in life doesn't matter anymore because oxy or whatever your drug of choice is better. And I only had 3 oxy. They gave me 3 when I had my surgery. And when the third one, I took them 3 days in a row, and the third one was gone, and I was sad. I was like, oh man, I really liked feeling that way, and I would love to feel that way again. And now I know that I can never, ever, ever take oxy because, gee, I love it. And, that just became a thing for me. In future injuries, they would be like, okay, we can give you oxy. I'm like, nope, don't do it. That's a bad idea. And I just represent things realistically and I don't make it preachy. And that is something that people have a problem with. And, kids, teens in particular, it's like they know when you're talking down to them and they know when you're condescending and when you're being disingenuous and when you're preaching at them, and they are not going to listen to you. Like they just aren't. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to be told that they're wrong. No one does. But I I also think that when they have evidence in their lives that drugs actually make you feel amazing, right? Then, and that's part of what they do. Like that's the hook. And so I write about it honestly, and I write about like emotions honestly, and I write about especially female rage and things like that. And I just write about them honestly. And that's the most feedback that I get from people, especially females. They'll just be like, "Wow, I have never felt so seen and validated and like I'm allowed to feel this way and be angry." Like, I was like, yeah, you were sexually assaulted. You're allowed to be pissed off, right? Like, you don't have to be like, I forgive my attacker. You don't have to do that, dude. Like, you can be pissed. That's okay. Um, so yeah, I'm just honest and I'm genuine and I'm forthright and I always have been. And I always like speak uh about reality and it makes people uncomfortable and I'm like, well, you're not uncomfortable with me and you're not uncomfortable with my books, you're uncomfortable with the world because that's what I'm writing about and that's what I'm talking about. That's what you're actually uncomfortable with. So you know I don't know
Yeah, and
how to I don't know how to counter that.
well, and you mentioned a lot of the pushback in heroin coming from, the acknowledgement that there is a reason why your protagonist gets addicted to opioids, and it reminds me a lot of when we were talking to Ashley Hope Perez, with her book, the challenge part that everybody likes to point to is like the very beginning of the book, and yours is like the very beginning of the protagonist's journey. I'm not sure where I'm going with this question wise, but how much do you feel like, in these challenges, how much do you feel like context is ignored and how do we combat that as authors and librarians?
Context is ignored. Like that is generally the primary problem. And I'm not trying to be a jerk when I say this, but reading comprehension comes into this. And so it's like people aren't thinking deeply about what the book is actually saying very often. But the other thing, most of the time, and you know this, people that are challenging these books are basing it off of there are people that put together groups that put together PDFs that are just like, here is every single despicable line in these books, and they're completely taken out of context. And here is, and this is the line, and this is the page number, and then at the bottom there's a tabulation of all the swear words. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, when you look at it, it's just like, oh my Lord, there is nothing redeemable in this book whatsoever, because it's completely taken out of context. Everything is taken out of context. And so it's like, I mean, you can do that with anything. You can make anything sound terrible if you take it out of context. And that is a major problem, right? Because for a lot of people that get pulled into this frenzy of book banning, they aren't actually reading books. I mean, I've talked to people that have problems with my books, and they'll have a specific point, and I'm like, okay, but what did you think about this scene when that gets repudiated? And they're like, oh, I didn't read that. Like, well, yeah, I know you didn't. That's why I'm pointing it out. Um, you have to read the whole book, right? And if you read the whole book, now so most of the time there is just this massive misunderstanding or lack of comprehension of comprehensively reading the book that is at work. But there are times though, like for heroin, for example, when way back the very first time I got challenged was that I asked the student reporter, I was like, can you please find out what the actual written arguments are? Like, what is the specific problem that people have with this book? And most of it was just out of context things. But one of them, I was like, oh no, that's a legitimate point. I hear you. So there's a point in heroin where one of the characters explains to the other that if you crush oxy, it takes it takes care of the time release coating, and it basically becomes heroin, and you can snort it, and or similar enough to heroin because the time release coating is gone. Um, and the parent was like, she's literally teaching kids how to do drugs better. And I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely. No, like if that were still true, you would have a point. That is no longer the case. Purdue Pharma changed, they knew that people were doing this, and they changed the product of the time release coating, and they made it so that you literally can't crush oxy anymore. It just turns into like a sludge. It won't powder. And they made that change like in, I mean, I think the like 2008, 2009. So, and that's a guess. I did my research a long time ago, but I very specifically, when I was writing heroin, combined drug culture from the 90s and the early 2000s. And I did not use like different types of names for drugs and like how to procure them and all these different things. A lot of it is late 90s, early 2000s information, because I want to make sure I am not writing a how to, right? Like, it's very important to me that my books are accurate, but they also can't be. And this is how you know, this is how you use your spoon and your needle. No, like that's terrible. I would never do that. But I do understand that someone could read that scene and be like, oh my God, she is just literally telling teenagers how to snort oxy. And I was like, nope, that's a valid point. And at no point in the book did I clarify that this actually doesn't work anymore. That will not be a functioning action that you can take because they changed the chemical makeup of the coating on Oxycontin. And I was like, oh no, that's a valid point. And here's my response to that. I am a responsible human being, and I am not telling kids how to do drugs better. So there, and I had never thought of and that's ignorance on my part. I hadn't thought, oh, somebody's going to read that and think that I am giving an instruction on how to crush up oxy and snort it. So it's like that was not completely out of line. So it's like, I acknowledge that, but also give me some credit. It's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm a responsible adult.
Yeah, and just like with the objectionable line in Out of Darkness, it comes to this idea that a lot of people, sorry, I'm getting an alert that I'm running out of time. A lot of people don't understand the difference between representation and endorsement, especially when it comes to fiction for young people.
Of course.
So You mentioned How Girls Are Made coming out in November. What's next for you after that?
So I have a horror novel that'll be coming out in around Halloween of 2026. Rough title at the minute is What Rough Beasts. It is a horror novel set in a wildlife rehabilitation center. So think like Little Shop of Horrors, but with white-tailed deer. And there's like, reincarnation and mushrooms and a dogfighting ring. Like it is just bizarre. So that'll be coming out in October of 2026. And then I have an adult novel coming out in probably late 26 or early 27, and that is called The First Cut is the Sweetest. And it is like, what if America's pop music sweetheart was actually a serial killer? So that will be coming out, and just got a lot of things cooking, and I'm really excited about all these different things that are going on in my life. But I'm really looking forward to How Girls Are Made getting out there because um, you always love your own books, of course, but I just really think that there's something in there for every teen girl. There is something that's going to speak to her and, really see herself and hopefully provide some solutions.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So kind of closing things up, you know, you're, as you mentioned, not afraid of controversy in your personal life, in your books, but we are in the climate that we're in. So what do you want to say to, the librarians watching, about stalking Mindy McGinnis and similar authors who are not afraid to represent reality? What do you say to those librarians about doing that in this current social political climate?
Well, first of all, people tell me all the time, they're like, thank you for writing these books, or you're so brave. And it's like, I'm not actually. Like, I am just writing books. The people that are being attacked are librarians and educators. They're the ones that are having their licenses taken, losing their jobs, some of them being prosecuted criminally. That's not happening to me yet. But that is something that I always remind people. It's like being a librarian or an educator right now is actually risky. It's insane that this is the world that we live in at the moment when you can go to jail for doing your job. But, you know, I do have resources available on my website for educators specifically defending heroin and the female of the species, because that's something that those are the two that get attacked the most. And I felt that it would be helpful to different groups that are defending my books if I put together impact statements from readers talking about like how they felt validated by this or seen, or even how it affected their lives in a way that they were like, oh, I need to stop taking oxy for fun on the weekends and things like that. So I compiled two different PDFs, one for heroin, one for female species, because those are my two that get in the most trouble. And those are available on my website. I don't know that I actually have a link that's like front facing, but it's just mindymcginnis.com and then /, and I believe it's book banning. There may be a dash in between book and banning, but if you
And
can't
I'm
find
sure
it,
to link that in the article.
yep. And if you can't find it, email me. It's mindy@mindymcginnis.com. So
All right. Um, Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. This has been an incredible experience. And if it weren't for the Zoom notification that my free trial is about to run up, I'm sure I could just listen to you talk about your work and just for hours. Um, I guess just closing things out, you mentioned that you substitute a lot in the district where you used to work. Do you ever get recognized by kids as, or do they know going in that our
they
sub?
know going in, but like, here's the thing. I am from a tiny, tiny, tiny place. And I've been substituting for so long that the kids that are freshmen right now, I was their long-term English teacher when they were in fifth grade. And I am just Miss McGann. Like they know that I'm a writer and they think it's cool, but I am literally just this person that works at the school to all the kids. My kids went there and my sister teaches there. And it's just more, it's a really small town and everyone knows me. Like it is tiny. We graduate like 60 kids a year. So everyone thinks it's cool that I do what I do, but they're also just like, I'm just, when they say Mindy McGinnis here, it just they're more likely like, well, wait a minute, isn't that Dick McGinnis's daughter? Like that's how I'm gonna be, recognized where I'm from is because, we're a big farming family. So that's how people know my name here. When I'm out of state, I can say my own name and people are like, oh, you're the writer. But at home it's and that's fine. Like I like it that way. But no, I did have one time we had a kid like move into the district, and it was when I still worked at the library, and I was at the front desk, and the like library doors open, and she stuck her head in and she went, "Oh my God." And I went, "What?" And she was like, "You actually work here?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she said, "You're Mindy McGinnis." And I was like, "Oh." And I just started laughing. I was like, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, the other kids said, Miss McGinnis, the librarian, she's a writer." And I said, "Mindy McGinnis?" And she said they were all just like confused. And I'm like, "No, they don't care, dude." It's like
All right. Well, thank you so much. And looking forward to How Girls Are Made in November and really interested to see your foray into official horror because I was actually planning on asking if you'd ever consider that because your books drift into horror plenty,
yes,
but it's great to hear that you're going to be formally entering the genre pretty soon.
I am. Yes,
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on the Hub and have a great day.
absolutely. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.